Yves, welcome, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Yourself?
Doing well. Enjoying Permissionless?
I am, yeah. It's a really nice event. It's a different event than usual. So, some of our team was at Token 2049 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Incredibly dense. So many people. Permissionless, Salt Lake City. Kind of the opposite. You got this massive space, less people, so it feels wide and open, which is really great for business development, meeting people, having chats, networking in general. There's always a space that people can talk. I love it. It's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. I heard Token 2049 was like the Super Bowl of crypto conferences this year. And then I didn't go, but from everyone I know that went, that was like the synopsis. And then here, when I think about that, it's like, this doesn't feel like the Super Bowl of crypto, but it's fun and you can network and you can be a little bit more intimate to get to know people.
For sure.
It's been great, especially the after side events and parties.
Yeah, tons of side events. And again, just spacious. So you actually get to have conversations, which is usually rare. Networking at crypto events is cool, but it's always difficult to find space.
Yeah.
It's rushing. Everybody's in and out. A lot of people get sick too. Endless days type of thing. And here, it's kind of a notch down. I wasn't at Token 2049 this year. Is the first year I didn't go, but Token 2049, you've got the F1 going around. You typically have Super PAC at the same time. Incredibly dense city, Singapore, and so it's it's very vibrant. I wouldn't say Salt Lake City is vibrant. It's kind of very much the opposite. But then for networking, I find I get way more out of this than I would out of a Token 2049. Okay, it's a very different different style.
Yeah, different
but I'm
vibe.
really enjoying this, and really high level people here as well. So. Decision makers are here, people from throughout the industry. I don't know if it's because the cost is cheaper. Obviously, Permissionless has a good brand behind it. And so, really good people came, really good discussions, but then space to be able to have to do it. So,
yeah, I mean, BlockWorks that's putting it on, they produce some really high quality stuff. Yeah. So the brand is very well known. Permissionless is well known. I'm just surprised that it's so mellow. And I think it's also partly Salt Lake City.
I think
it's a very low key city.
Well, when I came in, usually from the airport to here was 15, 20 minutes, no traffic. You walk outside, got these wide streets, almost no cars. It feels somewhat like it's dead. But then it is vibrant in its own way. And it is my first time here, so pretty interesting. But yeah, enjoying it so far for sure. Really awesome, good. I am very happy I came.
So to kick this off, before we dive into exSat a little bit, I'm sure people will love to know your story as well. We ask every guest because I think in this space, everyone has an interesting kind of venture into Web3. It's not your typical pursuit, given that it's a fairly young space and industry. Yeah. So what's your story, man? How did you get into this space?
I guess it all starts when I was really young. I was fortunate. So I'm French-Canadian, and French-Canadian families, a lot of children. And so I have a lot of uncles. And many of my uncles happen to be in software development or hardware, or basically I grew up around computers. So I started building computers very young, started coding very young, went to university in software engineering, realized it really wasn't for me. One thing led to the next, and I ended up working for the federal government in Canada as an economist. And the machinery of government and just the slow pace of government really wasn't for me. And I started mining in 2010, so very early on, because I was always in that group. When other people in high school were out partying, I was on my computer, and I was a computer geek. And when Bitcoin came about, it was very interesting for me, and not so much for the financial aspects of it, but in the beginning, it was just contributing to something larger and computing your hash power, basically. And I'd been folding protein for a while. I don't know if you were there during that time, but there was a big period of time where this idea of contributing to a larger pool was a thing, and Bitcoin kind of leveraged off of that. So I started doing that. One thing led to the next. I left my formal employment, jumped right in crypto full time. 2017, 2016, 15 is really when I got back in more formally. I'd stopped mining at that time. Came back in full force, did a few projects in this space, which then led to exSat. And, I started off in Bitcoin, and it's kind of funny. I've been here since 2010, so it's been 15 years. I feel really old. The gray is showing for sure. And I started off in Bitcoin, and I guess 15 years later, I'm coming back to Bitcoin, kind of a full circle. So all of the work that I did in between is now being applied to the project that is launching in 2 weeks. And so it feels pretty good. And also at a time where there seems to be really a resurgence of interest in Bitcoin and scaling Bitcoin, which is really cool.
I feel like a lot of people got in around 2017. Everyone I've interviewed here has been getting into the space around the same amount of time. So
it's ICO summer 2017, right? A lot of people came in and kind of saw the opportunity of what potentially could be. It was the first time that you had the promise of you'd be able to use this thing called blockchain more than, you know, just a simple transfer. You know, CryptoKitties brought Ethereum down, and then you had all these Gen 3 layer 1 scaling solutions come about. And there was just this promise of maybe this is the time. And it clearly wasn't the time, but was the time at the time.
The time
and we're
is
now in a new
slowly.
cycle, right? But like you said before, this is a nascent industry, right? We're new. And so there's still so much work to do. But every time, every cycle, and we just entered a new one, is really interesting because it's very different than the previous one. And this time, I feel like it is different again. We say that every time, but this one really feels different with Bitcoin ETFs, with more institutions coming in, with kind of this idea that I was talking about this on a Spaces not too long ago. This idea that a few years back, when Bitcoin was coming up and after happening, in general media, all you heard was about the downsides of Bitcoin mining and how it's bad for the environment. That kind of disappeared. Or in the first beginning, it was always how Bitcoin's bad and it's used for nefarious reasons. And it was, oh, now it's, you know, the climate side of things. And this time, we're not seeing any of that. I was attending talks here yesterday, and you had some big mining pools that were there, and you had a congressman that's running for Senate. And they were talking about the optimization of the grid. They were talking about the benefits that Bitcoin mining can actually bring to local communities, how it can offset some of the challenges with the infrastructure costs of setting up these large grids, and how Bitcoin mining can come and help. So the narrative has shifted completely. And with every cycle, it just legitimizes this space further and further. And that's really exciting.
Absolutely. I love to see the narrative shift in that way for Bitcoin, because it's always been attacked over and over and over again. And that's felt like ever since 2021, you know, the space has had its issues, but Bitcoin has seemed to find footing. And now everyone wants it. Everyone wants to touch it.
Yeah.
We're not quite there where I can spend it at Starbucks and get my latte, but I think we're getting very close. And
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. Yeah, I think that's interesting, right? We got Ethereum and Ethereum Solana, but I'd say mainly Ethereum through EVM, really pioneered a lot of the use cases in this space. That's where the majority of the developers were. That's where a lot of the applications are. DeFi, a lot of it stemmed from there, right? The actual usability of this technology. And Bitcoin was kind of left behind. And so with Bitcoin, really all you can do is just buy and hodl. Maybe sell it at some point, not recommended, but there's not much you could do. And in the last year and a half or so, we've seen so many scaling solutions deploy onto Bitcoin or try to scale Bitcoin. It's all this untapped liquidity that's just been sitting there. And it's traditionally the entry point for most people. With now the ETFs being approved, it is definitely the entry point for large institutions. And so, you know, I like that we're kind of full circle back to how can we scale this thing? How can we make use of you know, the king, Bitcoin?
Yeah, you got to respect your crypto elders in the space, which is Bitcoin.
For sure.
But yeah, BitcoinFi, it's a big thing.
Yeah,
it's coming full steam. I've talked to a lot of people, not here, surprisingly, but you know, just generally through the podcast and doing interviews. There's a lot of people trying to build out a DeFi ecosystem around Bitcoin and seem to have it figured out with some different layer 2 solutions.
I'd say maybe a year and a half ago, we started really seeing a lot of application developers kind of go in that direction. I was at BTC Hong Kong earlier this year, and then I was at BTC Nashville this summer. And the amount of people that are there trying to scale, I think at some point, not a week went by where you didn't see 10, 20 different L2s come about, like, hey, raising their hands, we're trying to do this, we're trying to do that. And for us, we saw it coming. So we started preparing last year, and we started looking at, all right, what could we do? You know, how could we position ourselves? What does the market need? What is lacking? What do we currently have in that we've built that we could leverage? And really that led to exSat. And the idea is basically to help Bitcoin scale. So we don't want to compete with Bitcoin. We're not building on top of Bitcoin. We don't want to compete with L2s. We believe that the L2s can actually benefit from what we're running at. We're trying to position ourselves in between the two. And the idea really started off with what we call the hamburger approach. We originally wanted to think of, okay, could we potentially be a data availability layer for this? Because we saw that a lot of the L2s all were facing the same issue. They're all having to index their own data off-chain because it's an extreme cost, tremendous cost. There's no decentralized option out there with an economy built around it. And for the end user, what that means is just lack of transparency, lack of accountability. And it doesn't mean that they're doing anything bad. It just doesn't really align with the ethos of what Bitcoin was in the first place. And so we started, working towards that. And while working towards that, we kind of went step by step to, okay, well, what kind of stakeholders do we need? And how would we position this? And so the architecture of what we were building started changing, leading to what we are launching now in 2 weeks. But really, all of that was informed not by, from day one, we knew what we wanted to build. It was, we have an idea of where we want to go, what is everybody else doing, and how can we help position to help the space. We want to be able to help scale Bitcoin. We want to be able to help scale those Bitcoin L2s. We want to be able to help the Ethereum developers take what they've already done and tap into Bitcoin liquidity and tap into a further user base. Because we saw kind of like what Ethereum did in the very beginning, the segregation of liquidity when it started scaling out. But then through the EVM, people started playing now in the same sandbox type of thing, and how powerful that was for Ethereum. And we wanted to replicate that for Bitcoin. And so the solution kind of aims at doing that, kind of a mixture of the graph, but Chainlink, Celestial. Like there's a few different components of here's what worked, here's what, and then how would we go about doing that? Yeah.
Got it. And then so how do you guys do that with exSat, the scalability portion of that? What does that look like? What's entailed?
Well, it all starts off with the layer 0, the data availability layer. And it's this idea that UTXO data is core to Bitcoin. How could we potentially synchronize that data, leverage the robustness of proof of work, leverage the underlying philosophies of Bitcoin, but then the power of POS and the power of the scalability of, okay, now if you somewhat have the right players around the table and you're able to mirror that UTXO data, synchronize it somewhere onto a network that is scalable, then you'd be able to kind of have the best of both worlds. And so our journey really started with, who are the first players? Who are the ones that if you're not going to replicate POW, because you're not going to do a new POW chain because POW has scalability issues, well, the best closest thing is actually to get the miners. And so we started working out with miners, doing partnerships with them. And we, at this point now, have roughly 60% of the hash rate that's synchronizing data. And so all they're doing is their incremental, very, very minimal extra cost for them, synchronizing the UTXO data onto RAM, onto our product. Why RAM? It's actual physical RAM, so it's decentralized physical infrastructure. It's RWA as well. It actually is tokenized, so people can buy it or rent that resource, because then you can write to it. It's multi-layered indexing. So part of my co-founder Zach was giving a really good analogy earlier. He's talking about Lego, and he was saying, why would you want to index UTXO data? So if you've got UTXO data, first of all, it's extremely expensive because there's a lot of it. We're talking about up to block height 840,000. It's about 170 million blocks. That takes about 90 gigs worth of data. So if you now want to decentralize that, that means every single machine on your network needs to at minimum have 90 gigs worth of data. You need to incentivize them to do so. You need to somehow have an economy around that. But then if it's not indexed, it's like having a huge Lego box with all of your Legos in it, but you've got all these different colors. But maybe I just want to look at the ordinals data. And ordinals data, let's say it's yellow blocks. Well, if I index it in a proper way, then my cost to be able to go fetch the data I need is optimized. So it makes it much easier to actually handle the data, be able to do something with it. And so we start off by synchronizing the data, indexing the data. It's made available, it's transparent, so people can query it through a block explorer. And then we thought of, okay, well, now we need to validate that data. Because if we just validate ourselves, then your bottleneck becomes there of, well, why would you trust me to validate the data? So we started partnering with larger institutions, whether they be exchanges, known exchanges, custodians in the space. So exchanges, think of BitGet, OKX right now are currently running on exSat. Custodians, so Matrixport, Cactus Custody, Cefu, Kobo, that kind of custodian. And then infrastructure providers. So those that run on multiple POS chains, so that's their bread and butter. Think of Everstake, Infinity Stones. Those are running on our chain. So we started gathering all these different stakeholders around the table of each of them bring something quite unique that's necessary for an ecosystem to thrive. Throughout that process, so that they would validate the data that's been synchronized by the mining pools themselves. Throughout all of that, we're also thinking, well, how do we incentivize these people? If we go about it a traditional way where we as the exSat Foundation, there's a token supply and we have a team allocation, and maybe there's a pre-mine, whatever it is, it kind of goes against that Bitcoin ethos. So we decided for tokenomics, complete fair launch. So even we as the foundation won't have any tokens. We will need to, like everybody else, proof of work, go in and either validate, and there are requirements to be able to do so. So validate the data,
No
and then we
founders
mine.
pool or anything.
No founders pool, nothing. Completely fair launch. That way, everybody that's at the table is incentivized to bring something to it to make it work. And by talking with those stakeholders, they really like that approach. And so there are minimal requirements to be a validator. You need to be able to stake 100 Bitcoin eventually, because there's no exSat tokens, because it's a fair launch, and it only starts when the network launches, and it mirrors Bitcoin. So for the first 6 months or so, as we catch up to current block height, it's going to be 50 exSat per Bitcoin block. So same as what Bitcoin was until you catch up, and then it's going to be the 1.75 per block type of thing. But then everybody around the table now is incentivized to see this thing win, because everybody's equal. So everybody brings something different. We bring the core development. Right now, we're bringing the marketing. We're fully funded, so we've been paying everything ourselves. That was another interesting part of this was, if we go about the fair launch route, how do we actually get investors in this if investors want to be part of this? And that was a really difficult decision to make, because essentially the route we took, we don't have any investors, and because there are no tokens to sell. And so if you want to participate, it's proof of work. And that was also interesting to some of the stakeholders, because they knew they can get in on this early, start contributing to the network, and if it has value, they contributed to it, and so they get the benefit from that opportunity.
It sounds very inclusive for everybody overall, and I like that approach too. Not having a founders pool, make everyone work for true proof of work, like really sticking to Bitcoin's ethos. I think in that sense. And you guys said it's coming in 2 weeks.
Yeah, so October 23rd.
Okay.
So we've been running on testnet for a while. BTC Nashville, we launched the testnet. We announced a few partners 2 weeks ago at Token 2049. Cactus Custody announced, so Matrix Port announced that it would be deploying up to 10,000 Bitcoin and BTC wrap Bitcoin on the chain, so that the first validators have to put in 100 Bitcoin each, so that already gives some TVL. Cactus Custody adding some. There's a few other partners not announced yet, but they will be adding their wrap Bitcoin as well, so we'll have significant Bitcoin there in terms of assets TVL at launch. Been running this test net. We're now scrambling to make sure everything is ready for that launch on October 23rd. October 23rd, mainnet launches, and now we start synchronizing. So what I was saying earlier is we've already caught up and have written all UTXO data up until block height 840,000. On October 23rd, that's when the mining pools, think F2 pool, Ant pool, Spider pool, some of the largest pools, we've got 60% hash rate right now. We'll start synchronizing, catching up from the halvening up until current block height. So it's kind of an accelerated mining period. And then once they reach that state, then the network is completely synced with Bitcoin, and the same block issuance on one side is.
How long does that take?
Roughly 6 months.
Okay.
So we can, obviously it's a knob that we can adjust to make it go faster or not. There's some technical constraints.
Sure.
You want it to go. You don't want to do it too fast, but you also don't want to do it too slow. There are no exSat tokens out there, so there are liquidity considerations. Some of the validators might want to hold on to the tokens. Some of them might want to sell them off in order to be able to pay for operations. And so, we're going to see those dynamics play out, and we'll be able to then adjust afterwards. But essentially, as of October 23rd, the validators are going to be forming the governance council. And so they will be, participating in this in terms of what are the next steps, how quickly do we do this? But I'd say 3 to 6 months will be caught up, and then that's when kind of the hard launch starts, because now there won't just be BTC staking requirements to be a validator. It'll also be exSat token requirements, but now there will be exSat tokens in the wild, so I think exchange listing, market making, that kind of thing.
Okay, so more of a soft launch next 2 weeks, and then hard launch Once you get the chain synced up,
yeah.
kind of.
I mean, it really is a hard launch, but the reason why I say that is think about how could you market Bitcoin before Bitcoin launched, or how could you participate in Bitcoin before Bitcoin was a thing? So you see Hal Finney and you see a few others. In the beginning, they were the ones doing the work, and so they got rewarded for that. Well, similar to this, we've been on the road now for about a year, attending all the large conferences, sponsoring, giving talks, etc. So this is known, and during that period of time, we've accumulated people that see that there's an opportunity here. We're going to launch with probably around 30 to 40 different nodes, very recognizable institutions. I've named a few, but there's many, many more. And hopefully during that period of time, then people are going to start seeing, all right, this thing is live, but how do I get in on it? Like, how do I actually buy the token, or how can I become a validator, etc. Once the thing is live, that's when you can start saying, for example, what's the APY on your stake type of thing. Well, right now the token is not live, so you can't do any of that. So that's why I'm saying it's more of a soft launch, but really it is a launch.
Okay, cool. And then what does the rest of your roadmap kind of look like going into 2025? Other than the launch itself and syncing up the chain, are there other things that users should be aware of? Developers, I assume, maybe they want to work on this too. Yeah. Things that might be coming up into 2025, maybe even the last part of this year too.
Yeah, good question. At some point, exSat staking will begin. So the exSat staking requirement will start. That's more for the people who want to participate as a validator. But really, our target is to hit 90% of the hash power. So we're currently at 60% approximately for launch. We want to go up to roughly 90% hash power that's contributing and synchronizing data to the chain. That goal would be by the end of Q1 2025. That would be very idealistic, but we're on track for that. Aside from that, we also want to obviously increase the TVL. So some of our partners are going to be launching their wrapped version Bitcoin. We'll be having our bridge that'll be set up, because the bridge is not going to be there at launch, where an individual user will be able to cross the bridge, lock their Bitcoin, get XBTC on the other side, and start playing in this BitcoinFi pool. Aside from that, then it's going to be the focus right now has really been on the miners, the validators, kind of those institutions. The shift will go towards those L2s, Bitcoin L2s, and or on the EVM side, because the chain is EVM compatible, those applications on the DeFi space. All right, come and deploy. Now there are users. Now there's liquidity. Now there's exSat tokens available. Now you can see what this is about. And so our business development side of things will significantly change towards applications coming onto the chain before that 6-month period happens. So that by the time that 6-month period happens, you've got use cases, you've got things to do on the chain. So there's a few things there. And I think the last thing to mention, one of our mining pool partners is working on a decentralized, not sure how you call this, but decentralized mining pool, like POS function type of thing. So think of you've got some hash power, you want to participate in exSat. Currently, you're giving your hash power to a large mining pool. You could come give your hash power to that portal, and then you'll be able to get your exSat rewards directly to you. Versus currently, if you've got some hash power, you're giving it to a mining pool. It's not transparent. They're giving you the rewards. Well, now you'll be able to do that kind of self-serve. And so we're working on that portal as well, and that's pretty exciting.
Awesome. And then what is your goal here at Permissionless for exSat? Is it to spread the good word? Is it to find partnerships and collaborations, new companies or projects to work with? What are you aiming to do here in your last day?
Well, get the word out is one of them. So for me, today's a very heavy media presence day. So I just did a space. I'm doing this. I had another podcast afterwards.
Nice.
So getting the word out, but also just meeting like-minded people. And I think that's what was really good about Salt Lake City and Permissionless. Kind of like what I mentioned earlier, there was a Bitcoin institutional track 2 days ago. So the first day, just a series of different talks, and just meeting those people in that space as well, because Permissionless is traditionally more of an Ethereum-based conference, but we're starting to see the Bitcoin presence here. So talking to others of like, why are you here? Why do you see this connection being made? And everybody was kind of a similar thing. Ethereum has done incredible work in the ecosystem in certain parts. How do we bridge that? How do we actually start working together and break down those barriers? And we've got really, really positive response in general. And so attending Bitcoin conferences is really interesting because everybody's in Bitcoin. So you talk about Token 24/9. One of the things that's if you've been, everybody's got a booth and everybody's giving away their swag. because everybody's trying to get your attention. So everybody's competing against one another. Go to a Bitcoin conference, everybody's there for Bitcoin. People don't give away swag. People sell swag because it's Bitcoin swag. Everybody wants a Bitcoin swag. Nobody's competing against one another. So it's a very different dynamic.
Yeah.
And then coming to something like this, we're starting to see kind of both come together. That's kind of new. And so part of it was to see that and go talk to people that typically wouldn't necessarily be interested in Bitcoin scaling solutions because they're more on the Ethereum side of things, and then seeing what they're all about and how we can potentially work together.
Yeah, permissionless is very interesting this year, isn't it? Maybe part of its location and the fact that it's at the end of the year, and maybe people are a bit tired from traveling. But I mean, you got a lot of Bitcoin stuff mixed in, AI stuff mixed in, things that traditionally aren't even in this space, and now you got all these different cross intersections. It's been a lot of fun, though.
Yeah,
I've heard there's been some amazing talks.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned AI. One of the talks I saw was about Bitcoin mining and AI and how to optimize the grid type of thing. So, yeah, I agree with you. Really, really interesting talks and a really good location to be able to do so, I think.
Yeah, man. Yves, thanks for taking the time to come on. It's been great. Good conversation. Really excited about what you guys are doing with exSat, so keep up the good work. Let's do another episode in the near future when you finish your soft launch, maybe closer to the hard launch, or syncing up the chain. Let's come back on, do it again.
Sounds good. It was a pleasure, Brandon.
Likewise.
Take care.